Hopefully. Got it. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We're going to have a large crowd today, so maybe it's nice if you introduce yourselves in the chat. Also, this Zoom room is turning video off upon entry. So, for the benefit of our speaker, if you could, please do turn on your speaker, your video. Pardon me. Had a long week. It's the beginning of the semester. Trying to, climb in the saddle. Also, I think your microphone should be muted. It's probably best to keep it muted until we have a discussion later on. We're going to wait a few more minutes. Just please introduce yourselves in the chat. And I'm Eric Mazur. Many of you know me. I am on the faculty at Harvard. I've been active in education research and trying to improve education, which is at times feels like moving a mountain. Great. Okay. South Korea. Wow. Ireland. And then Ohio, Virginia, London, UK. Fantastic. Poland. So exciting. We're going to wait another minute or two and then get started for today. Okay. Okay, we certainly have people from all over the US, and I guess in Arizona it's like 8 a.m. right now, right? So thank you for getting up early on a Saturday. And what time is it in South Korea? It must be quite late at night, like 1 a.m. or so. So thank you for joining that late from the other side of the globe. Okay, well, it's 11:03, so we better get started. As I said, I'm Eric Mazur. I, sort of started this effort to create a network of high school teachers 3 years ago. And I am really thrilled to see so many people here today. The participant number is still ticking up, but we had something like 120 people register for this event. And when I started this 3 years ago with the intent of simply organizing a workshop for something like 25 teachers at Harvard, I could never imagine that 3 years later we would have a global network of almost 700 physics high school teachers spread all around the globe, as this audience really is showing. And we've had a lot of exciting events. You've seen me a lot, probably, if you've been a member of the network for a while. So I'm really excited that we are now slowly transitioning to a period of more ownership by some of the members of the network. In particular, I would like to give a shout out to the Polsty core group, who has organized this event, a number of other exciting events like the Coffee Talk on October 9, and we have additional events in the planning for later this semester. So today's event, all the credit really does not go to me, which is why I should really shut my mouth as quickly as possible. But really, the credit goes to Rob Krakel. Thank you so much, Rob, for doing this. And I will let Rob introduce our speaker for today. I'll be here, but I'll be silent.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming from all over. To the few of you, thanks for pulling an all-nighter apparently. Coffee is good, as I can see many of you have. So this session, we really wanted, when the core met, to help sort of new teachers or transitioning teachers or people who are doing physics for the first time. We were trying to rack our head around how do you make the classroom what you want? And I think it was our core member, Maya, who said, we should get Joe. And I said, we should get Joe. I had the pleasure of meeting Joe in Las Vegas. We were there for strictly business. No fun was had whatsoever. So I'd like to present to you Joe.
Great. Thank you. I'm Joe Cossette. I teach high school physics in Minnetonka, Minnesota. And I'm thrilled to be here. This is very exciting, and it's so cool to see people coming from all over. I wore the exact same outfit as my headshot, just so that people would recognize me from the posters that are going out. It's an opportunity to match whenever I can. So to start off, just a shout out and thank you to Rob and the rest of the Pulse C team for inviting me to be here. This is such a cool series, and it's an honor to be part of this. And I have huge imposter syndrome just being attached to this in any way. So I'm excited to share what I've got. I've had the opportunity to share different lessons and activities that promote engagement and learning at a variety of different places. But this is the first time I've ever tried to do something so meta and share about the process of creating and sharing and what that looks like. And I'm hoping that it can be applicable enough that people can find themselves in it through stories that I'll tell kind of about some of the experiences that I've had. So to start off, most of you have already done this, but if you haven't, please introduce yourself in the chat. It's just cool to see where everybody is coming from. And like I said, most are already there. I have one other request. This is a little homework assignment for you to think about. If you were to pick one other profession as an analogy for what teaching is like, what would you pick? It's a conversation I've had with a variety of different teachers, and I think it's just fascinating to hear other ideas. One of the themes of this talk that will come up is just the power of community in the sharing and building of ideas. So you can just drop it in the chat when you have an idea. I'll vamp for a little bit, being mindful of the fact that this is recorded, and that time where I'm just staring at a camera is kind of weird in a recording to start off the talk. But you can pick any analogy. You don't have to explain it. You can just say it and let people make their own interpretations about what you mean when you say that particular profession. This is phenomenal. For those that are watching this back, I'm seeing things like ER doctor, lighthouse keeper, archaeology, actor / community organizer, herding cats. So as one comes up, feel free to drop that in the chat as we're going. I figure since this is live, we can make this a little bit more interactive. So I have a lot of things planned for this talk. My hope is to be close to 20 minutes so that there's lots of time for me to stop talking and other people to start talking. But my goal here is to really focus on this concept of ideas and sharing ideas, where ideas come from, where ideas go. And then ultimately come back to this question of like, what is teaching and how can you compare it to other professions that are around there? So like I said, a major topic here that I want to focus on is where ideas come from. I believe that ideas are often the accumulation of experiences that whether or not you're realizing it, you're pulling from things that you have seen or done or heard of. I am lucky to work in a school that has 10 licensed physics teachers, which is just bonkers for most contexts. That's a lot of physics teachers in one school. And one of my favorite parts of working in a team that size is often after school, we'll have these conversations where someone will pop into the room and say something like, do you want to see something cool? Or like, you got to check this out. And then we'll go and do some cool physics together and learn together. And I know a lot of people aren't in a situation where they have that huge community to share ideas with. But the beauty of social media and online is a lot of those ideas can spread outside of your own classroom walls. So I want to share some examples of things that have happened fairly recently through social media like Twitter and Facebook, there are times when somebody will post like a demonstration, something that they just tried. Here's one that Dan Jones over in the UK posted of a toaster inflating like a garbage bag and building kind of this hot air balloon situation. I saw that and I thought that was so cool. I just couldn't wait to try it myself. And a year later, I finally had an opportunity to build one for my own context. And of course, I wanted to add my own spin. So I have like a 4-slice toaster, like a classic American, like extended as much as you can. And then it was able to create something that went up to the ceiling of our commons. And again, it wasn't my idea. It was a thing that I saw somebody do and wanted to do it myself. Then the other direction, I had posted a video of like a maglev train that I made out of old hard drive magnets. So they're permanent magnets and the train goes around. And Dan saw that video and 2 days later had one built in his school. um, just from the video that I had posted. I didn't post like a schematic of how to do it or any of that. It's just the idea. It's seeing this thing and saying, "Oh, I think I could try that," and then trying it. I think some other examples. There was a day where we were having this, "Oh, you got to check this out" moment at my school. We had the Van de Graaff generator out, and one of my colleagues was sharing something that he used to do with his students. He would have them draw a graphite drawing and then ground it through the Van de Graaff generator, and the spark follows the line of graphite, which is the coolest thing ever. And I had never seen it before. So I spent the entire day playing with it to the point that like I was feeling jittery from all the electricity. And I posted a video, and it turns out I wasn't the only one that hadn't seen that before. And over the next week or so, people were posting their own versions of trying this with their own spin. Here's one where it's Pikachu lighting up a lightning bolt, and taking that idea and remixing it and finding other ways to try it, because most physics teachers have Van de Graaff somewhere in their building just to play with. This doesn't have to be this fancy demo either. A few years ago, Bree Burnett Dreyfus posted this picture that was talking about a visual that she uses with friction. So talking about static versus dynamic friction, and uses kind of these crate foam to show the microscopic view. And I didn't have any crate foam, but I had egg cartons. And I used the same general model with my students out of egg cartons. And seeing that picture from Bree changed the way that I introduced this concept basically for the rest of my career. Like, this is now the model that I use just from a picture that I saw. And this doesn't have to be about physics. Kelly O'Shea posted something several years ago about something she does at the top of her test, where it's this little fill in the blank where the name goes. And now all of my tests look like that. So for the circular motion test, they have to write their name and saying something that they're considering, or blank is known for blank, or blank will one day blank. And it's just this fun culture builder that I was able to get this peek into Kelly's classroom and see this one aspect of many different things that she does to build her classroom culture, and find ways to incorporate that into my own. So, um, one of the things that I want to mention and really stress is it is easy to forget how much experience you've accumulated. That it's kind of a slow burn when we get ideas, that we build them up 1 year at a time. And by year 10, 15, 20 of your teaching career, you have all of these things in your inventory that you just don't even know you have. And you can't remember a time when you didn't have it. And working with newer teachers, I'm realizing that there's these things that I just assume everyone knows because I've always done it, but not everyone knows that. They haven't had a chance to see that before. So one of the things I want to encourage is sometimes it's the things you wouldn't think of that are the transformative things to share for someone. Just some little thing that you've always done that you take a picture of and someone sees and like, oh, like that's a cool way to do that. Like I've never seen it done that way. And you might not even remember where it came from. But the act of sharing that then gives that idea new life and finds new homes for it. So then what happens when these ideas come? Like what do we do with those ideas afterward? I want to share a couple different examples of just the transformation and evolution over iterations of ideas. One being a task called inquiry cubes. This is one that I have posted on my blog that has seen probably the most activity because it's something that is a great first day activity for a lot of people. And to me, it came from my pre-service, my teaching education program at the University of Minnesota. It was one of the first lessons that we did. It was an inquiry cube that was taken from these journals that were about teaching nature of science. So this is an idea that's existed for a while, far before I became a teacher. And the idea of the inquiry cube is it's a cube that students can see 5 of the 6 sides, and they have to try to figure out what's on the 6th side without seeing it. And there are a couple different designs, like this one from the National Academy's journal has these names kind of around the cube. This one has numbers and letters from this Brain U website. And I decided my very first year of teaching that this was going to be my first lesson ever. So I spent an entire weekend before school started watching Netflix and drawing inquiry cubes. And basically, what it started, I just built some cubes, pasted some paper on the side, and then while I was watching Netflix, came up with patterns that I thought were cool. Because I wanted not one cube, but I wanted 3 different levels of cubes. I thought that that would be kind of this cool, like when you're done with one, you can try another, and some of them are harder and some of them are easier, and they can like self-differentiate. So I made these and I used them for a couple years and I loved it. Like it was a task that I really enjoyed. Again, not my idea. I just kind of remixed it and came up with some other patterns. Eventually my paper cubes kind of wore down, so I upgraded them and I like made an electronic one that I could print and laminate. And now I've got like this beautiful set of these cubes that have lasted me years. But that's not super shareable. That I had, like, not everyone has access to like build these cubes out of old 4x4s. So when I was at a conference, I'm part of the Knowles Teacher Initiative, and we were sharing our first week activities, and I wanted to share this idea. So I made a version that people could print and fold and tape and like make their own without needing woodworking skills. And in order to share that file, I decided to make a blog because that seemed easier than emailing out like a file, a PDF or a PowerPoint file. So I made a blog. I call it Passionately Curious. And this was one of the first posts that I made on that blog. And honestly, it was just a way that I could share the files. Like I had no plans for it beyond sharing it with the 5 or 6 people that I was talking with. But being online, like it found an audience. And now like people around the world have made their own inquiry cubes, which just boggles my mind. That was never my goal, but it's something that was able to happen because it was shared. And then I thought it was done. I thought that was a good spot for it to end. And I had the opportunity to go to the Perimeter Institute in 2019 for the Einstein Plus teacher workshop. And there they had an inquiry cube task that was similar, but used these little 1 by 1 inch wooden cubes and stickers that they printed on name tags and cut out. And I was like, that's a great idea. That's so much easier than the finicky folding and printing and all of the cutouts. So I went back home and I made my own small ones. I had address labels, so I made one that worked with address labels, but it's the same idea, right? Like again, not my idea, something that I picked up from seeing somebody else's amazing iteration of that. So now, in addition to the big cubes, I have these little adorable cubes to go along with it, and I felt like that was done. Like I now have a version of this task that is this beautiful hands-on, students are like gathered around, huddled around one shared space that will always work and is super shareable. And then school shut down for for a couple years, and even when we were back, we weren't allowed to be in a close shared space. And I was dealt with trying to figure out like, what does this look like when we can't have a physical thing to manipulate? And after a lot of playing around and sharing ideas with other people, found a way to make it virtual and uploaded it to a website that stores 3D models for 3D printers, and students can interact with the cubes and drag them around, which is so cool. And I was able to kind of make a repository of all these same cubes in a virtual format. And I figured I'm done. Like now, like there's nothing else that can possibly happen. Like these cubes are physical and virtual, like it's finished. And then I got a comment through my blog from one of the facilitators at Perimeter Institute that pointed out extremely correctly that my cubes, while being cool patterns, miss something very important about the original task. And that was the inquiry cube isn't supposed to have one set answer. Students aren't supposed to know what the answer is, and there isn't one target answer, because in science, there isn't necessarily one set final answer, which led me to try to make one more cube. And this cube kind of came from those conversations that I had of what would a cube look like if it had multiple interpretations. And this one here can be interpreted in thousands of correct ways, because correct is based on whatever the student that's making the argument looks like, and what they're thinking through. So now I feel like there's all these cubes, it's good to go. And I went to Perimeter Institute one more time this summer, and somebody mentioned that when they do a task like this, they put the cube in the middle and don't let students touch it. I've never done that before. I've done this task literally every year I've taught. As the first lesson I ever did, and I hadn't done it with that approach before. And this year I did after talking, and it was transformative. It was something I had never done before, and it changed the way I'm going to do this task into the future. Just put it in the table and then not touch it. It was just a totally different experience. And this whole journey was something I never expected, but I think tells a lot about the story I want to tell here. That there's this feeling that something can get done, but there's always a way that you can make it better. Or like an idea is like, what if it looked like this? Sometimes there's an evolution to fit a need. So sometimes you can't have a physical cube anymore. Like, what can you do? And then there's outside input and inspiration that can change the trajectory or journey of what something might look like. All right, example 2, plotting the stars. When I first started teaching IB physics, a topic I had never had to teach before was stellar organization, or like finding order in the stars. And there was an activity I found online from an old textbook where students would take these star cards and then put order to them by putting them on a graph. Astrophysics types will know this as an HR diagram or Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. And a really cool activity. I loved it. It was this hands-on opportunity in a topic that wasn't super hands-on because we were talking about stars. You can't touch them. And I used this task for a couple of years, and I loved it. But there were a couple things I didn't love. I didn't love, like, there were too many stars. It always felt like there were too many pieces and things were on top of each other. The text felt kind of small. It took forever to cut out all of these circles. And most importantly, in IB physics, it was really important that students knew the difference between brightness and luminosity. And all of these stars listed the star's brightness, where it technically was the luminosity, that these stars weren't 10,000 suns bright in the sky. That'd be crazy. That'd be a very bright star. And that little thing led me to retype this entire PDF because I didn't want it to say brightness anymore. I wanted it to say luminosity finally, and not have this like possible misinterpretation that was coming from my students. So I retyped it and I made just a duplicate version of this activity where instead of it saying brightness, it was about luminosity. And I was happy with that. I made some other changes. I made the text bigger. I made it hexagons instead of circles because I think hexagons are just cooler and it was easier to cut out and I could fit more on a page. And I felt good about that. I posted it as kind of an iteration for those like me that tried this task and liked it, but wanted it to say luminosity. Here you go. And people found it. People liked it. Somebody commented with some really important points. They said, hey, this star has a temperature of 6,000, but it's blue. Like a 6,000 Kelvin star shouldn't be blue. Or the sun's temperature, this known temperature, is wrong. It's like 50% off. Or like there's no white stars. Like some of these stars should probably be white. And all of those things were true. Like I didn't make any of the data. I just used this task and made it prettier and changed the font and changed one word. But this was all true, and now it was getting at me that all of these things were wrong about what I thought was a final solution. So I went back and tried to figure out like, okay, what would it look like if the stars were the right temperature and right color? There's a great PhET simulation that you can plug in a temperature and it does the black body spectrum and gives you a little picture of the star that gives you a color. And I started trying to sample all of those and it was taking forever. Eventually, I found this website where somebody did that. And they calculated what the hexadecimal color code was for every degree Kelvin that a star could be. And then I was able to like create this workflow that worked out. And then ultimately made a spreadsheet where I re-looked up every single star to find data that was correct. Because he was right, like that sun wasn't the right temperature. I was trying to figure out what other stars are wrong. And I went to Wikipedia and found the most up-to-date information on each one, and created this new version, a new set of stars, which I'm calling version 3.0. I haven't had a chance to post this one yet. It's been coming. I've tried it once with my students, but it now has data that I think is correct, colors that I think are more accurate, more information because I had to look them up anyway. They now have the mass on them too, and some size. Some of them are bigger than others because Betelgeuse is just an enormous star. And now the task was something like this, which is the same feeling as the original task with a couple tweaks, and tweaks that I've added because they annoyed me, but I think also make it a little bit more powerful and a little bit more real. So I think this brings up kind of the importance of specificity of language. Sometimes in a classroom, a teacher uses one word, and that's an important part of the way they teach that class. So that like in this class, we talk about this as displacement or position or delta X, or there's a variety of different things. And if you find a resource that's all a PDF and you can't edit that word, that feels inauthentic to what you're trying to present in your classroom. So I think that also brings up the importance of editability. And if you're sharing things, make them editable so that people can remix and make it their own. And then this, for me, was a huge opportunity to learn. I know more about stars now than I ever thought I would when I graduated with a mechanical engineering degree. That was not something that was in my trajectory. One final example, escape rooms. There's a group called BreakoutEDU that kind of built this space around you can have an escape room in a class, but instead of escaping the room, they're breaking into a box and kind of figuring it out from there. I wanted a lot of these, but they were too expensive for what I had. So I made my own out of cool boxes and locks and things that I could source online. And from that, built with my colleagues a bunch of different activities that were these rich, like problem solving experiences where students were working together to crack codes and get into the toolbox. There was something so satisfying and collaborative about that. And then again, COVID happened, and this idea of huddling around a toolbox wasn't as appealing as it once was. And I was trying to figure out, like, what does this experience that I spent so much time on look like in a virtual setting or something that's a little bit more socially distant? Like, I had this task that they were solving these conservation of energy problems to come up with clues and figure out, and I couldn't do it anymore. And then Frank Noskizzi came up with a way to do that task. He took the clues that I had posted and made a virtual escape room, made this Google form version where instead of unlocking locks, they were typing into a form. They could access the clues in different ways. And it was great. And Frank and I had a long back and forth on like the pros and cons, the things that we were learning from this experience. And that led me to thinking more about the task itself. And one of the things I loved about it was that it was this rich group worthy thing that one person couldn't do it by themselves. And I didn't feel like this quite did it yet. Like this solved one problem, but it didn't solve all the problems. And I was wrestling with like, how do I build that experience online? And then my wife and I, with our friends, were playing a lot of Jackbox TV. It's this game that you play virtually through your phones. And one of the games is called Bomb Corp, where you have to defuse a bomb by like snipping wires in the right configuration. And everyone has different uh, rules and different things that's given to them, instructions on their phone. And they have to collaborate to try to solve this puzzle together. And it's entirely group worthy because everybody needs to be part of it. And I was thinking, okay, what if we did that? So I tried it, made a motion escape room where instead of one Google form, there were 4, and every student had their own, and they were like figuring out together, because sometimes they would have a problem like this Usain Bolt problem that doesn't have enough information to actually solve the kinematic equation, but somebody else's form has this random information about Usain Bolt's acceleration that they can learn by talking with each other. And it's something that worked really well online. And then I still use now. I actually almost prefer this in some ways to the physical breakout, because I don't have to set anything up, that it's ready to go and students can just jump right in. So this process of escape rooms, kind of this format, this breakout EDU idea, is applicable to a lot of different concepts. It's very flexible, and then kind of brings up this questioning of what makes something group worthy and how can you add flavors of that to anything else that you have going on. And then finally, this overarching idea of what if. Like I am obsessed with the idea of what if, and like what is that next possible iteration to make this thing even cooler than the cool thing that it already is. Okay, finally, what is teaching? As I mentioned before, I've been posting a lot of stuff on a blog that I call Passionately Curious. It's from an Albert Einstein quote. So not even that is an original idea. That all of these ideas are borrowed and remixed. And by going through my website, as I did the other day, I can kind of see a timeline of what I've thought teaching is. My first posts were always of me like singing songs in my classroom, and I thought that was like the coolest form of teaching. I don't necessarily think that anymore. Like at the time, I felt like that was the epitome of what my teaching could be, was writing songs and sharing these songs. But then my focus kind of shifted. It was like, what if we have an idea so big that you need to read a blog post to like even wrap your head around it, like these escape room lessons, or like what does a first week look like to help teach students how to work together, or then like pandemic comes along and like what do these look like online, and like how do we remix that for a virtual setting. And then once we are back in person, what do in-person demonstrations look like? If you're new to teaching, you've never had to do things in person, like what does that look like? And then what can students do that's more hands-on? So as I go back through my blog posts, I can see this change in my own thinking of what is the most important thing to me at this moment in time. Just iterations on my own feeling of what a teacher is. And that has led to me trying to think about like, what do I want this to be? I don't want this to be a professional curriculum. Like that's not what I want to do. I want this to be like, I want my role to be like a recipe blog. My favorite part about looking up a recipe online is that you scroll down to the bottom and you see everyone's comments of how they took that recipe and then found another thing to do to that to make it work better for their family that has allergies, or make it taste better or less spicy. And they do their own remix on this recipe that's been posted. And you can learn a lot just by reading the comments of what people have done as the next step upon that idea. And that's what I want this to be. Like, I want this conversation to be like a recipe blog where these aren't final ideas. This is just the iteration that I have to give to you to come up with another iteration and make it better. And there are a couple of driving things that I think of when I am trying to visualize this iterative sharing. I think it's important that it's free for all, that it's editable, as I mentioned before, that it shares the how and the why and starting to think about the teacher moves that are associated with it. And then it's living and changing. I think I've changed that Inquiry Cubes blog post 5 or 6 times as things have changed for me and things have iterated. And then one step at a time. Right now, if I look at my website, I feel overwhelmed at like, how did all of that happen? But it happened in really slow trickles. That it was like I had an idea and I shared one thing, and then one thing, and then one thing, and eventually it's a lot of things. And people that are thinking about sharing, it doesn't have to be a lot of things right away. Like one thing at a time is great. Like one thing is more than no things, and then eventually it becomes more. So back to this original question. If you were to pick one other profession as an analogy of what teaching is like, what would you pick? I think your ideas are probably better than mine. I cheated and I picked 2. One is a curator. So like a museum curator. A teacher is often thinking of how do I best present the story of how to learn. Like students can find all this information. It's not like I'm the keeper of physics knowledge. They can Google it, they can find it, but I'm coming up with ways that kind of guides them to it in a way that's engaging and meaningful and appropriate and thinks about deep learning. Um, I'm assembling an experience for them. I also think teaching is kind of like uh, an event planner. This is really just an excuse to show a picture of the best state fair in the entire world. It's like an event planner. So the Minnesota State Fair is this incredible event that happens every year, and it changes every year. And it changes because they learn things. So they try something and it works or doesn't work, or it's like, well, that was close, but we'll try it differently next time. And then next year they get to try again, which is so awesome. That's what teaching is, right? Like you try something, and then another year later, you have a totally new set of students that didn't try it before, that you get to present it like it's a totally new thing, but it's the same thing, just tweaked. And eventually it becomes this big collection of activities that have been assembled over years. So final thoughts, and then I promise I'll stop talking. Um, I think many ideas are collected, they're not invented. Even when I think that I have invented something, or it's like, I just came up with an idea that no one's ever thought of. If I think hard enough about it, there's usually a story, like the stories I was telling, that like I didn't come up with that. I assembled it. Like I had an experience that put me in all of these places that eventually I was able to assemble and maybe come up with something that was new. But the ideas themselves weren't new. Like I didn't invent them. I just assembled them. The lesson is never really finished. This idea of what if and what's that next iteration that keeps me up at night, like what could that next thing be, like what makes this even better. And then the advice that I always give new teachers is you have permission to revise. um Sometimes I feel like we're handed a curriculum, or we think that we're handed a curriculum that can't be changed, but everybody's context is different, everybody's style is different, everybody's person is different. So to do something that's authentic to you might not look exactly the same as something that you find posted online or something that a colleague gives you. Like the act of revising teaches you a lot about what you value as a teacher and what makes your teaching magical in its own way. So just the process of doing that isn't about the final product, it's about how you grow and create something new for your students. So with that, thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. All of the things that I have posted here can be found on my blog, or on what's left of Twitter, as that ship is slowly sinking. Yeah. So I think this opens up now, right?
It does, if I can find my unmute button. Thank you, Joe. That was, I think we all have a lot to take from that. I really like the idea that you brought up that, a good, I think it was Picasso that said, a good artist copies, but a great artist steals. And I think that really, the permission to do that is such an important thing for new teachers. This year in my school, we used actually your alien project, and we modified it by having a couple of my colleagues just pull out one of the aliens. So I had no idea what was in this box that I gave students. And so I really just couldn't help them at all. So at this time, I would like to open up Q&A. We try to just keep it to a question per person, and get through as many as we can. And yeah, if you just raise your hand, I think it is under, is it under reactions now or participants? But we'll start with Eric.
Reactions.
I said I would be silent, but I can't stop myself. Joe, you've sort of, hit the nail on the head as far as the way I look at teaching. So thank you for a fabulous talk and your infectious enthusiasm. As I had a smile on my face during your entire talk. I first of all, I think you're not giving yourself enough credit about invention, because many inventions consist of putting old ideas together. So, it depends a little bit on how you interpret the word invention. But what struck me very much about your talk is the impact COVID had. And sort of a parallel with my own experience, it sort of pushed me to think outside of the box in ways that would not have happened otherwise. I mean, and so my question to you is, if you were to measure the success of what you did during the year that we were forced online, how would it compare to what you did before and what you did after? I mean, if you were
That's
to
a great
sort of
question.
compare the quality of teaching.
I think COVID was an interesting inflection point for teachers. It was like this explosion of required creativity in some ways, whereas like you feel like you have everything set and ready to go. Well, it turns out you can't use any of that. Or like if you do, like what does it look like now? And that innovation period was actually in some ways kind of exciting for me. Like it forced me to rethink things that I didn't think I had to rethink anymore. Um, I think it also was an explosion of sharing, which I think was important to the whole profession. Like I just seeing what I was able to see and gain ideas from and share ideas, that happened more during those years when we were trying to figure things out than any other time that I can remember. That people were now all of a sudden looking to see what else is out there, like what else are people doing and trying, and what can I learn from that experience to make my own. Now we're dealt with this interesting situation that we're kind of back to normal, like we're back in person and we can technically do things again that we were able to do before COVID. And I feel almost bad for new teachers. Now they're coming in, and before we had like a folder that said, like, here's everything we did last year. Like, we'll remix from that. But like, that was kind of the accumulation of what we had done. And now we're like, well, we have 4 folders from the past 4 years, and every single one is totally different. And every time we're planning something, we're trying to figure out which of these 4 iterations makes the most sense now. And it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. Even for me, as someone that was part of each of those iterations, it's just mentally challenging because we have good things that we made that we have to now determine, were they good from necessity, like that was the best we could do, or were they better than what we had before? And that leads to some really interesting conversations in our team.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Joe, while people get their questions. One of the comments that comes up in these conversations a lot is just time. So very briefly, what have you found that you can cut so that you can do these fun things?
That's a good question. I teach IB physics in 1 year, which is about half the time that you need to teach IB physics. And when I started teaching it, I had this decision to make that I could cut all of those fun things that aren't necessarily preparing them for the exam. Like these fun things that I do aren't making their test scores necessarily higher, but I do think it makes them want to be there more. And I kind of made the decision like I don't want to cut those things. That's what makes this a joyful place to be. And that to me was a higher priority. So for me, it's about prioritizing. Like I want the space to be a certain way, and I'm willing to make it less rigorous is not the right word, but less test focused in order to do that. And one of the ways that I build time in my day is as much automatic feedback as I can, where I can build something that they can automatically get checked, and then I'm not involved in that, which cuts down on my grading and allows me to try to prepare experiences for them more.
The floor is yours.
Hi, I guess you're referring to me. I'm Sujata. Fantastic talk. Thank you. Lots of ideas. I'm wondering if you can speak to what you have seen different in the students. I teach at a university, and when we get freshman students in, we find that the effect of COVID has been to set the students back from how they used to be. And so while teachers might be doing quite exciting things and turning everything digital, What ultimately matters is what the students take away. And I loved your ideas of, they enjoy being part of this. And I'm going to do some of your activities to make my classroom more enjoyable. But if you would speak to that experience of the students.
Yeah, I think all teachers everywhere are seeing changes, right? That it changed everyone, teachers and students alike, to have those experiences. And I think part of it shows up when I was looking at kind of the timeline of what I've considered important when I was posting things. Like all that I've posted recently has been all focused on what can we get to do for students that aren't technology based at all. Like we're building rockets now. Like their iPads go away for like 3 days in a row, and we're just doing things physically in the space. And part of the reason that we found that so important is we need to almost rewrite their thinking of what school looks like, because during COVID it was all virtual, and sometimes they wrote their own rules of what things were important and what things they engaged with. And then now if we hit them with something totally different, it allows us to set kind of a new order. I don't know if that closes the gap. I think I still see the gap. We just had our first IB physics test 2 days ago, and I saw algebra mistakes that I've never seen before. And I don't know what to do with that sometimes, right? Like I'm teaching IB physics. I don't usually have to teach the algebra, but I'm going to have to start teaching the algebra because I want them to engage and feel like they can achieve the final answer, even if they understand all the physics concepts. Sometimes their algebra is getting in the way.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Joe Bellina, I think I saw your hand earlier. Did you have a question?
Actually, as soon as you started talking, you sort of brought up the same topic. I'm curious how you find the time to do all the things that you do. I mean, most of the time when I talk to teachers, because I do teacher development, time is their big problem. There's so much, pardon my French, crap they've got to deal with that they don't have time to do the kinds of creative things they would like to do. Is that a curious structure of your school where there are 10 of you, or just what's going on there?
I think part of that is I'm very fortunate in the context that I'm in, that we have such a large team, which allows me in part ways to have less that I need to prepare each day. I will also say, like, I have two small kids and I don't actually have that much time. That my time that I have to work on anything is post 8:30 and pre when I want to go to bed. And I don't want to do any of this during that time because that's the only time I have. And I think part of it is finding what I think is important and blocking out time for that. Where like I really want them to have a hands-on experience. I'll block out time to build a rocket launcher so they can have that hands-on experience. Sometimes it is picking and choosing and realizing that I can't do all of the things and saying like this quarter, I'm going to try to find one thing and kind of approach it as that one thing at a time model. And I think the last thing is, in some ways, I have found this act of sharing and thinking about this as deeply as I have to post it and share it with other people has allowed me to free up time later on. Because when I'm coming up on something, I go back and I read my own blog post as kind of like a journal entry, as a reminder of what I did. And that lessens my own mental load in coming years. And over time, I now have kind of this record through Twitter and through my blog of like, here's the roadmap of what I have done in the past. that has allowed me to do that and then add more.
Yeah, one other comment. I thought it was very interesting that in the overhead that you used about what you thought teaching was, there was a clear evolution from your performing to your students performing.
Yes, I'm glad you noticed that. I noticed that as well, that decentralizing myself in the classroom, I think is important. And also, like, I think part of what I wanted to show in this talk, just in general, is while these are my experiences and I may be like a central player because I saw all of these things, I don't feel like I'm the main character in these experiences necessarily. I think like I'm just the person that was in the middle, like seeing things and then putting them together.
Good, thanks.
Great. Chris, all yours.
Thank you. So I wanted to go back to what you were saying about the having like 4 different iterations of things after post-pandemic. I think I feel very similarly. And I think I'm curious how you balance that sort of everything can always be better with how to not go insane. Like, I mean, I have so many things, always have so many ideas about how things could get better, but then realistically, there's only so many things that you can do. And so I guess I'm just, and I'm also in that space, that same space of like, we've been modifying our physics curriculum at our school over time, and we have all the digital stuff. And I took a new modeling workshop last summer that changed a lot of ways I'm thinking. So I have all these different things and how do you pick? How do you decide what to focus on? I don't know, how do you sort of balance that it could always be better with how do I manage what I'm going to do for this year in this moment?
I'll start by saying I don't know if I do a particularly great job at it. I can share kind of what I do, but I think there are times where I am going insane, and that I don't think I am the model of the calm, like I have a perfect plan in place for how to handle this. I start with what I did last year, and I pull it in and I say, okay, that's what I'm beginning with. I'll give myself 1 or 2 tweaks. The idea of overhauling everything is something that I personally don't have time or energy or mental capacity for. But I can start with what I did last year and change 1 thing. And then I can focus my effort on that and let the rest of it run its course. And then over time, like the Minnesota State Fair, it becomes the best state fair in the entire world. Because little things that have changed 1 year at a time eventually build up to big things. So trusting the 1 at a time, I think, is what helps me.
Thank you. And I'm a Minnesotan, so I can appreciate the state fair.
Yeah. There's a couple
Awesome.
Minnesotans here.
Barbara.
Just want to support what Joe was saying about changing things just a little bit at a time. Like everywhere in Australia, teachers are burning out very quickly. And I think one of our biggest temptations is to always tinker, always try to make the perfect version. That back in the old days when there was the textbook, the plus was that you couldn't change it. You had to just live with it, and you do things on the fly a bit more in your classroom. And I think we have to hold that mentally with us. So we have our resources, we take notes as we go along, and we do something at the end, but we don't try to make things perfect for every day, because we just kill ourselves with trying, because we all want to do the best by our students, particularly the kind of people who come along to this sort of event. And we have to practice self-care and give ourselves time to reflect and just take it slowly, and we'll get there.
I think it's perfectly said. I also think for me, finding what fills your bucket is important too. And then being able to throw yourself into that. Because everybody in teaching is in it for something. And it's probably not grading necessarily. Like maybe that's what fills your bucket. But if you can focus your energy on those things, that helps too.
So 2 quick things. We're going to have Isa and Ben. You guys can ask your questions. I know that more questions are going to come up. We like to just keep our hour. But we are going to have another event that I'll talk about after the 2 questions. So as you get more questions, there will be a space to discuss those. So write them down without losing them. Isa, all yours.
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for this great talk. So a comment. I want to thank you for normalizing the feeling of just feeling crazy sometimes as we do this work. I think that's great to know that we're not crazy as we're feeling crazy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And then my actual question is a collaborative effort. So shout out to Jolene Johnson, who helped me iterate and figure out what I was trying to say. So, we're a network with a number of teachers, like a number of context, environments. And one of the things that we've come across, of course, we know that educators oftentimes leave before they have the opportunity to build that toolbox to be really effective. So the question is, how can we leverage master teachers in this community or our community in a way that both honors their knowledge, but also helps new teachers and gives them hope that they can make it to being a master educator themselves?
I think that's a really good point. I think part of it is normalizing for experienced educators this idea that what they consider as automatic and has always been known is something that they haven't always known. And it's so easy to forget that because as you build things, you focus on the new and you assume that you've always had the old. And finding ways to share the old with teachers that don't have that yet. And for us, like in our context, after COVID, we came back and we were starting our Waves unit. And I realized that our new teachers that started during COVID hadn't ever done a single one of our Waves things in person. And over time, we had built so many cool like Waves experiences and demonstrations. And we just had like a Waves party one day after school where we just experienced them together and said like, we're just gonna pull them all out, bring them into the room, and just do all of them. And you will have had a chance to experience it. Because I think for new teachers, when they hear experienced teachers say like, oh, and then we'll do like the laser thing. And like the laser thing means something to the people that have done it before, but doesn't mean anything to the others. And kind of building those spaces that they can then learn what the laser thing is in a time and space that's appropriate. That they don't have to incorporate it yet because that can be overwhelming to incorporate them all, but they at least have the ability to if they wanted to. And I don't know exactly what that looks like in larger online communities necessarily. I think it's sharing the things that we don't think are shareable, knowing that somebody else is going to get something from that.
Thank you.
Well said. And Ben, take us home.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you, Joe. Congratulations. Your word, FISTech word, much deserved. So the things you kind of mentioned was that you're just trying to get better every day, and some people talk about spending a lot of time trying to get better. And as a scientist, well, as a creative person and filling my bucket, that's what I like to do. Also, as a scientist, I worry that sometimes I don't have data to always support the claim that I say things are getting better. So, you're a creative person in the classroom, is really enjoying filling your bucket and making priority to the things that you want to do in your classroom. But how do you know that it's actually getting better? What do you look at in terms of data and evidence that supports the claim that the things that I'm doing are actually improving my teaching and my?
That's a great question. I wish I could say I do know, and I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure I know. I have done like this last week, I did an activity with both of my 9th grade classes. I did the same activity, same ways. And each of those classes performed very differently on the exam that we had on Thursday. It makes it hard to know sometimes what my effect is, or like what a particular thing's effect is, because every group of students I've ever seen is different. Even within the same year and the same day, the groups of students that I see are different. And the scientist in me is really stressed out by that, because I don't have enough sample size to be able to compare and actually see if the things that I'm changing are changing things. I think because of that, like I said, I don't know if I'm the foremost expert. I'm sure I'm not at being able to track student abilities and how the things that I do are affecting their abilities. But what I can feel like I track is student engagement. And students want to be there, and students' attendance and students' collaboration. And I hope that impacts their scores. I do address when scores are low and try to find ways that their scores and their understanding can improve. But the short answer is I don't know if an activity that I do is the reason that they do better or worse, or if it even changes it at all. That's a very unsatisfying answer to end this talk.
But I think it's the most realistic. So I want to take a second to thank Joe. Joe, seriously, thank you so much for taking time to come talk to us. You've changed at least 60 people's lives today. So if everybody's got 30 students, that's what, 1,800 people reached at minimum, the way that I see it. And that's only for one class. So I'd say that's a pretty good dent. In the chat, I posted a few links. We are going to have a follow-up conversation day on October 9th. That's just going to be any questions or thoughts that you had from this that sort of settled as the time went on. Bring your coffee, because it is coffee talk. We also will take tea, that's fine, or water, whatever you'd like. There's also a link to a Google Drive so that we can share our resources. I think the biggest takeaway from this is share often, as well as a PD participation certificate. And all the links you can find in the chat. We'll also probably send them out as an email after. Thank you to the core group. And then again, thank you so much, Joe, for taking this time. Absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be here. This has been really fun.
Safe travels back home, everybody. I think it's probably a short trip for most of you.
It's amazing.
This was awesome, Joe. Very
Thank you.
inspirational.
I need to go
And
through the chat now. I saw things flashing that were wonderful things, and I just didn't have time to think about them. So that is my
thank you.
my news
Thank you so much. And it was really to sort of hear your experiences and